Why the Sultan's favorite daughter begged to be exiled instead of married. The forbidden letter. The parchment was still warm when the Grand Vizier found it, tucked beneath a jade paperweight on the Sultan's desk, a suicide note that wasn't a suicide note at all. It was a plea, written in Princess Mihrima's own hand, the ink slightly smudged where tears had fallen. The letter contained only 7 words that would send shockwaves through the Ottoman court. "Send me away, or I will disappear forever." What could make the most beloved daughter of Sultan Murad III, a woman draped in silk and pearls, educated in 7 languages, and destined to marry the most powerful governor in the empire, beg for exile instead? The answer lies not in romance gone wrong, nor in political intrigue alone, but in something far more sinister, something that festered in the perfumed corridors of Topkapi Palace like a wound that refused to heal. If you're captivated by the dark corners of history that textbooks dare not explore, follow this channel, because some stories are too haunting to forget and too important to ignore. Chakeracer, the Golden Cage, Constantinople, 1591. The Topkapi Palace rose from the earth like a monument to divine ambition, its domes catching the morning light and scattering it across the Bosphorus in ribbons of gold and crimson. From the outside, it was paradise. From the inside, it was a labyrinth designed to devour those who walked its halls unprepared. Princess Mihrima's apartments overlooked the palace gardens, where fountains whispered secrets to the rose bushes and nightingales sang songs that sounded almost like warnings. She was 22 years old that spring, with eyes the color of dark amber and a mind so sharp her tutors often joked, privately, always privately, that she should have been born a man. She read philosophy, debated theology with the court scholars, and played chess with a ruthlessness that made even her father uncomfortable. The Sultan adored her, perhaps too much. Murad III had 19 children from various concubines, but Mihrima was different. She was the daughter of Safiye Sultan, the Haseki Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. From birth, Mihrima had been marked as special, groomed not just for marriage but for significance. Her father called her his morning star, his little moon. He commissioned poets to write verses about her wisdom. He allowed her, unprecedented for a princess, to sit behind a latticed screen during council meetings, to hear the empire's secrets unfold in real time. But gifts given can become shackles worn. The wedding announcement came on a Tuesday during the evening prayer. Mihrima was to marry Hassan Pasha, the governor of Egypt, a man of 43 years with military victories etched into his face like battle scars and a reputation for iron-fisted rule. The match was politically impeccable. Egypt was the empire's wealthiest province, and Hassan Pasha was unfailingly loyal. The marriage would bind him even closer to the throne, cementing an alliance that would ensure stability for decades. Everyone in the palace celebrated, everyone except Mihrima, the mask she wore. The first 3 days after the announcement, Mihrima played her part perfectly. She smiled at the right moments, lowered her eyes demurely when court ladies whispered about wedding preparations, even laughed when her younger sisters teased her about finally leaving the palace. But those who knew her well, her mother, her chief lady-in-waiting Aishi, and her childhood tutor, the elderly scholar Hoka Nasu, noticed something had shifted behind her eyes. It was as if a light had been extinguished. Aishi found her on the 4th night, standing alone in the shadowed corner of her chambers, still fully dressed despite the late hour. The oil lamps had burned low, casting the room in a trembling amber glow that made the princess look like a figure in a painting. Beautiful, distant, already half gone. "My lady?" Aishi's voice was soft, careful. Mihrima didn't turn. "Tell me, Aishi, what do you know of Hassan Pasha? The real man, not the legend." Aishi hesitated. In the palace, information was currency, and even between mistress and servant, some coins were too dangerous to spend. "He is a capable administrator, a feared warrior. The Sultan trusts him completely." "That's what everyone says." Mihrima's voice was hollow. "But what do the whispers say? What do the slaves who've served in his household say? What do the women say? The silence that followed was answer enough. Aishi approached slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. My lady, there are rumors from Cairo. Nothing substantiated, but tell me. They say his first wife died in childbirth, but the midwives whispered about bruises. His second wife lives still, but in seclusion. She hasn't been seen in public for 3 years. They say she refuses to speak, even to her own children. Mihrima closed her eyes. And my father knows this? Your father knows what he wishes to know. The princess laughed then, a sound like glass breaking. Of course, the empire needs Egypt, Egypt needs Hassan Pasha, and Hassan Pasha needs, what? A princess to parade? A womb to fill with heirs? Another woman to destroy? My lady, leave me, Aishi, please. But Aishi didn't leave. Instead, she did something dangerous. She stepped forward and gripped Mihrima's shoulders, forcing the princess to meet her eyes. Then refuse. Say no. You are the Sultan's favorite. He has never denied you anything. Mihrima's smile was bitter. That's what I thought too, until I tried. The locked door. 2 weeks before the letter was found, Mihrima had requested an audience with her father. It was granted immediately, as all her requests were. She entered his private chamber, a room rich with Persian carpets and walls lined with illuminated manuscripts, with her head held high and her arguments prepared like weapons. Sultan Murad III sat on a low divan surrounded by cushions embroidered with gold thread. At 50, he was a man whose appetites had grown as vast as his empire. He smiled when he saw his daughter, that warm, indulgent smile he reserved only for her. My morning star, come, sit with me. She didn't sit. Father, I must speak with you about the marriage. The smile didn't fade, but something hardened behind his eyes. What of it? It's a magnificent match. Hassan Pasha is honored beyond measure. All of Constantinople is celebrating. I don't wish to marry him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sultan Murad's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You speak from nerves. All brides feel this way before. I speak from knowledge, father. Mihrima's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I have heard things about Hassan Pasha, about how he treats the women in his household, about his appetites. Appetites? The Sultan's tone was light, almost amused. He is a man, Mihrima, a warrior. Such men are not soft. He is cruel. He is necessary. The word landed like a blade between them. Mihrima took a step back, as if physically struck. Necessary? Sultan Murad rose from his divan, his robes rustling like disapproval itself. Do you think I built this empire on sentiment? On the delicate feelings of women? Egypt provides us with grain that feeds millions. Hassan Pasha controls Egypt with absolute authority. If I recall him, if I show even a flicker of distrust, the province destabilizes. And if Egypt destabilizes, the empire starves. So I'm to be sacrificed to keep the grain flowing. You are to do your duty, as I have done mine, as every member of this family has done since we first set foot in this city. His voice was hard now, imperial. You will marry Hassan Pasha. You will go to Cairo. You will bear his children, and you will bind him to this throne with bonds that cannot be broken. This is not a request, Mihrima. This is an order. And if I refuse? The Sultan's face went cold. You won't. But if I do? For the first time in her life, Mihrima saw her father look at her not with love, but with the same calculating gaze he used on his enemies. Then you will discover that even my favorite daughter is still just a daughter. You have no power here, Mihrima, no rights, no choices. You exist at my pleasure. And if you defy me on this, I will ensure that every door in this empire closes to you. Do you understand? She understood. Oh, she understood perfectly. The hidden library Mihrima spent the next 3 nights in the palace library. a forgotten wing of the complex where ancient texts gathered dust and the smell of aging parchment mixed with mildew to create an atmosphere of scholarly decay. Hokanasu, her tutor, found her there on the third night, surrounded by books on law, on marriage contracts, on the rights of Ottoman women. The old scholar sat down heavily beside her, his joints creaking. "You're looking for a way out." It wasn't a question. "There must be something," Mihrima whispered, her voice raw from lack of sleep. "Some precedent, some law, some anything. How can I have studied philosophy and theology in 7 languages if I can't even control my own fate? Because knowledge is not power, my child. Not for women. Not even for princesses," Hokanasu sighed. "But there may be one option. Dangerous, unprecedented, but possible." Mihrima looked up sharply. "Tell me." "You could petition for exile." "Exile. An Ottoman princess has never done it, but the law doesn't explicitly forbid it. If you were to formally request exile, to ask to be sent away from the court, to live in seclusion in some distant corner of the empire, your father would be forced to consider it. It would be scandalous, yes. It would damage his reputation, but it would also be legal. And he is a man who respects the law even when it inconveniences him. He would never agree. He might, if you made it impossible for him to refuse." The old man's eyes were sad. "If you threatened something worse." Mihrima stared at him. "You mean?" "I mean nothing. I simply observe that a sultan can force many things, but he cannot force a daughter to live if she chooses not to. And the scandal of a princess's suicide would dwarf the scandal of a princess's exile." The words settled over them like ashes. The night before, the wedding was scheduled for the first day of spring. 24 hours before the ceremony, Mihrima made her decision. She wrote the letter in her chambers, alone, while rain lashed against the windows and turned the world outside into a blur of gray and silver. The words came easily, because they were true. "Most honored father, I write this knowing that I am defying you, and for that I will accept whatever consequences you deem fit. But I cannot marry Hassan Pasha. I will not. You have asked me to do my duty. Very well. My duty, as I understand it, is to preserve the honor of our family, and there is no honor in chaining a woman to a man who will destroy her. Slowly, behind closed doors, where no one will witness or care. I have 3 choices before me. Marry him and die slowly in Cairo, refuse and be forced to marry him anyway, or remove myself from this world entirely. I offer you a 4th option. Send me into exile. Let me live out my days in some distant corner of the empire, in obscurity and silence. I will take no wealth with me. I will make no demands. I will cease to be your daughter in all but blood. But I will live, and your reign will not be stained by the tragedy of a daughter who chose death over obedience. The choice is yours, father. But know this. If I walk to that wedding ceremony tomorrow, I will never complete the journey. The Bosphorus is deep, and I have already made my peace with drowning. This is not manipulation. This is mercy. For both of us. Your daughter, for the last time, Mihrima." She placed the letter where it would be found. Then she dressed in her simplest robe, covered her hair, and walked out of her chambers for what she believed would be the last time. The dawn decision. The Grand Vizier found the letter at dawn. Within minutes, the palace erupted into chaos. Guards were dispatched to search every corner of the complex. The Sultan's council was summoned. Safia Sultan, Mihrima's mother, was roused from her apartments, her face a mask of terror. They found Mihrima in the gardens, standing at the edge of the sea wall, where the palace met the Bosphorus. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even trembling. She simply stood there, looking out at the water as if memorizing its patterns. Sultan Murad himself came to retrieve her, striding through the gardens with his robes billowing and his face contorted with fury, and beneath it, something that looked like fear. "Step away from the edge." Mihrima didn't move. "Did you read my letter? Step away." from the edge. Answer my question first. The Sultan stopped a few paces behind her. His voice, when it came, was strangled. Yes, I read it. And you are a foolish child who knows nothing of the world, of duty, of... I know enough to recognize cruelty, and I know enough to refuse it. She finally turned to face him, and in the pale morning light, she looked ancient. So what will it be, father? Will you grant me exile? Or will you watch me step off this wall? You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I? She smiled, and it was the saddest thing he had ever seen. You said I have no power. You're wrong. I have one power. The power to say no to you, even if it costs me everything. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Sultan Murad spoke, and his voice was nearly inaudible. You would choose exile over marriage? Over wealth? Over children? Over everything I've built for you? I would choose life, father. Even a small, obscure, forgotten life. Because at least it would be mine. The unspoken truth. What happened in the next few minutes was never recorded in any official history. The guards who stood at a distance saw the Sultan and his daughter talking, saw her step back from the edge, saw him reach out to her. But they never heard what was said. Some secrets are too dangerous for even history to hold. Years later, Aishi would whisper to a confidant that the Sultan had wept, that he had admitted in that moment that he had always known what Hassan Pasha was, that he had chosen the empire over his daughter, as sultans always must, and that when faced with losing her forever, he had, for the first and only time in his reign, chosen love over power. But that's just speculation, rumor, the kind of story people tell themselves to make sense of the senseless. What is known is this: the wedding was canceled. Hassan Pasha was told that the princess had fallen gravely ill and the marriage was postponed indefinitely. He never learned the truth. 3 days later, Mihrima left Constantinople under cover of darkness, accompanied by only 2 servants and carrying nothing but a single trunk of books. She was sent to a small estate in the mountains of Anatolia, far from the capital, far from the court, far from everything she had ever known. Sultan Murad issued a decree stating that his daughter had chosen a life of religious contemplation and study and was not to be disturbed. The court whispered for a few weeks, then moved on to other scandals. And in Cairo, Hassan Pasha waited for his bride. The mountain. The estate was modest by royal standards. A stone house surrounded by olive groves, with mountains rising behind it like walls and a stream that sang through the valley below. Mihrima lived there for 43 years. She never married. She never returned to Constantinople. She never saw her father again. But she lived. She established a small school for local girls, teaching them to read and write and think for themselves. She translated Greek philosophy into Turkish. She wrote letters to scholars across the empire, debating theology and science under a male pseudonym. She walked in the mountains every morning and read by candlelight every night. Travelers who passed through the region sometimes spoke of a hermit princess in the mountains, a woman who had given up everything for freedom. Some said she was mad. Others said she was the wisest person in the empire. When Mihrima died in 1634, she was buried in a simple grave overlooking the valley. On her tombstone, by her own instruction, were carved only 4 words. She chose herself instead. The legacy. Here's what the history books won't tell you. After Mihrima's exile, 3 other Ottoman princesses, women who had heard her story in whispers, also petitioned for exile rather than accept arranged marriages to cruel men. Only one was granted permission. The other 2 were married anyway. Hassan Pasha eventually married a different princess, the daughter of a lesser sultan. She died within 2 years. The cause was listed as natural illness. Sultan Murad III lived another 4 years after Mihrima's exile. In his final days, delirious with fever, he was heard calling for his morning star. She never came. And in the mountains of Anatolia, in a stone house surrounded by olive trees, a woman who had been a princess discovered something that all the palaces and silks and jewels in the world could never buy: the right to say no, the right to choose pain over destruction, the right to walk away from a golden cage even when the bars were forged by love itself. The question that remains: so why did the Sultan's favorite daughter beg to be exiled instead of married? The simple answer is survival. The complex answer is dignity. But the true answer, the one that makes this story more than just a tragedy, is this: because she understood, perhaps better than anyone in that glittering, murderous palace, that some forms of death don't require a body, that you can be alive and still be slowly erased, that submission, when given under threat, is just another word for annihilation. Mihrama chose exile not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to recognize that survival at any cost is not survival at all. It's just a slower way to disappear. And in the end, in that choice, in that refusal, she found a power that no sultan could grant and no decree could revoke. The power to remain whole, even in pieces. The power to be forgotten on her own terms. The power to haunt history not as a victim, but as a woman who looked into the mouth of inevitability and whispered, "No." The mountains of Anatolia still stand. The palace where she was born still gleams beside the Bosphorus. But the woman who chose exile over erasure? She exists now only in whispers, in fragments, in the kind of story that textbooks refuse to tell. Because some truths are too uncomfortable to teach, some rebellions too quiet to record, and some women too dangerous to remember. But that doesn't make them any less real.